Athletes have the best physiques on the planet. Research backs this up, and honestly, if you have half a brain, you would know that this looks a lot better than this gross stuff. Yet what's actually surprising is that athletes look a lot different in every sport. But it does make sense. Every sport has different demands. So let's have some fun and rate each sport by their physique from S tier to D tier and crown a winner for the sport with the most aesthetic physiques. If you've got a smart eye, you might have noticed that I had this bodybuilding physique, aka the Mr. Olympia, in D tier from when we started. The reason I don't have it amongst the boys down here is because it's not a real sport. But whenever I have a chance to downgrade bodybuilding, I will take it. C-Bum is lucky that I don't have an F tier on this tier list because it is by far F tier. And what's so ironic and funny is that bodybuilders think that they're building the most aesthetic physique, but from a real life perspective, they end up building the most unaesthetic physique. Ask any female on the planet. A bodybuilder is like a bad car accident. Everybody will look at them because it just looks strange and wild, but that doesn't mean it looks good, and actually it looks horrendous. Bodybuilders are not athletes, it's not a sport, but I had to put it in this tier list because they deserve it. Now on to the real sports, the real athletes. And we're gonna start with the most popular sport on planet Earth, which is football, or in my country, it's called soccer. And I've gone back and forth between B and C tier, but ultimately, being a former soccer player myself, maybe I have some bias, I put it in B tier. Football/soccer players are pretty notoriously skinny, particularly those who are not professionals. And I'm actually going to be putting a disclaimer now for the rest of the video because it applies very heavily with football and soccer. I am taking what the physiques are on average for the sport, because there are tons of sports that are carried by 1, 2, 3 insane physiques that skew people's perceptions of what physiques actually look like for the sport. And in football, Cristiano Ronaldo has an insane physique, Mohamed Salah has an insane physique, Erling Haaland has an insane physique, but overall people don't look like that. And football players are skinny, and it's not their fault. Football players have to run a lot, which is naturally going to lower their body set point and make it harder for them to add on mass. And then they also have the most year-round sport, meaning their off-season is short, and the off-season is the period where athletes build muscle. So they can't, don't want to, and don't have the time to build muscle. But they stay lean year-round. Their legs are also tremendous. And because they're so lean, they have one of the best muscle groups dialed in, which is the six-pack abs. So we're going to put football/soccer in B tier. And I might as well jump into a very similar sport in terms of the demands, tennis. Tennis, I'm actually going to put in C tier. I would put it in B tier. However, it's just a beta version of what a football physique looks like. You can kind of tell the difference between Carlos Alcaraz, which is one of the top tennis players in the world right here, and Cristiano Ronaldo. Ronaldo is much more muscular, much more defined because of that muscle. And the reason this likely is because football is actually a contact sport, while tennis is not. Tennis is a lot of cardio, a lot of moving around, and that's why these players get so lean, but they're also very skinny because they have to move around so much. Why have a bunch of muscle, which is basically a weighted backpack on when you're trying to play tennis? It's gonna make it a lot more difficult. Like football, tennis' biggest strength is how shredded a lot of the athletes get. But you can tell the difference here. They are both pretty similar in body fat percentage. However, Ronaldo has much more muscle mass. And that's why it would be unfair to be ranking tennis in B tier, so we're gonna put it in C tier. Now it's time for the most popular sport in America, the NFL/American football. I think this will be my most controversial one. Not here, not here, not here, not here. Now we're gonna put it in B tier. I'm actually gonna put it behind soccer or football, which might be a little controversial. Again, remember the criteria for this tier list is the average athlete for the sport. If you look at wide receivers and a lot of running backs, they are very aesthetic. But then you get into like the linemen, not so much. And you got DK Metcalf here, who is a little too big and almost bodybuilder territory. You have a lot of the athletes in the NFL in bodybuilder territory. I would actually consider the NFL athletes and the NFL physiques to probably be the most impressive of the sports on this list. But it's just like bodybuilding. You can have an impressive physique, but it doesn't make you aesthetic. But I find that diminishing a sport, an actual athlete, because they have too much of an impressive physique is not fair. So I'm gonna put it in B tier. Baseball is another really popular sport in America, and I'm going to be putting baseball in C tier. The first athlete that comes to mind for an average baseball player is like your catcher, your first baseman, like a David Ortiz or a Big Papi, or a Bartolo Colon. A lot of the physiques in baseball are not aesthetic. They don't even look like athletes when they're running to first base. Whilst the top guys do have insane forearms, they don't have to get very lean, nor do they ever show off much of their body at all, so they don't get typically aesthetic. And whether or not you agree with my list so far, drop a like so other people can see this list too and realize that athletes are the most aesthetic physiques. And if you don't like the video right now, I will send Leon Edwards to your house and he will head kick you in the face. But Leon Edwards is not his time yet. He is the main event like he always is when he actually fights. So now we're actually going to move on to basketball. I have basketball as A tier. Regarding the best genetics for an athletic physique or just being athletic, basketball is the best by far, highlighted typically by their small calves. Basketball players have the best archetype, is what I'll call it, for an aesthetic physique. The longer arms and legs, the smaller waist, the big shoulders. That's how most basketball players are built. I mean, I got Kawhi Leonard here. Look at those shoulders. Those are probably the most impressive shoulders, in my opinion, out of all the athletes here on this list. And basketball players will get relatively lean as they need their strength to mass ratio to be decent so they can jump high and they can sprint fast. So they cannot be fat. They need to be muscular. They also need to be athletic. And that's what happens, and you create these awesome physiques on archetypes that are naturally built to be very aesthetically athletic. That was poetry right there, and that's how I'm gonna phrase it. Now we got golf. I'm putting it in D tier, and this one's gonna be a little controversial as well. When I think of golf, I'm not even considering like the pro golf all that much. I'm also considering like your average dude who plays golf. Someone who's retired, the drunk frat bros. These are guys who are pretty fat. Those golf shirts don't fit them very well. You can see their belly. That's your typical golf player. The pros, like Tiger Woods here, they're in good shape, but compared to all the rest of these guys, the demand of the sport doesn't even require that great of a physique, so they're not gonna look crazy. So golf is gonna get a D tier. And now we've got the main event. MMA or combat sports gets the cake. It gets S tier. You might think I'm biased because I do kickboxing a lot. I'm a big fan of the UFC and MMA. But a big reason why I fell in love with the sport is because I have an athletic mind. And this sport requires so much athletically, and the physique show that, and that's why it's S tier. If you look at all these sports, tennis and football, for example, these are cardio sports. Football will have a smaller edge because it's a contact sport. But strength and power isn't as important. Sure, in both sports, you need to hit the ball hard, but placement probably matters a little bit more, right? If you're trying to knock somebody out, you need to hit them hard enough. No matter how well you place it, it probably won't knock them out. You also need to be strong because you need to resist takedowns, and if you want to get some takedowns, you need strength for that too. And you also need cardio because you can be fighting for up to 5 rounds. And then you combine this with the fact that you need to get absolutely dialed and shredded to have an edge in a fight. You're gonna get these shredded aesthetic physiques. Combat sports is the only sport where you need to get shredded for the sport, because when you get super shredded, typically that will result in a dip in performance. But because the strength to mass ratio is so important in MMA due to weight classifications, these fighters get absolutely dialed because they have to. And then an unfair advantage that there's so many weight classes. So you got some guys who are down to 125 when they weigh in, up to 265. You get a wide variety of aesthetic physiques. And honestly, I believe that there is a good gap between basketball down to NFL and soccer, and the UFC or MMA. And it makes me happy to put my best friend as S tier where he belongs. And because it is S tier, I actually rank the best UFC physiques in another video, which I'll put down in the corner.